Now, if you take your computer, you take the network cable and connect it into, say, LAN 1 of the CM3000. There's a 4-port network switch. That physically connects your computer to the CM3000. Now, if you take that CLAN 3 or 4, those are the ones that have power. If you take one of those connections and run it over to the CB6000 to its network port, you'll see that the CB6000 powers up. Now, when we ship out our devices, they are set to a static IP address. And the CB6000 has a static IP address of 192.168.1.104, like you see on my screen. The CM3000 is almost identical, but it's .103. We intentionally have those as different IP addresses so that you can hook them up at the same time without a conflict. Now, what we need from your computer is your computer is probably on DHCP. So we need your computer to get off of DHCP and onto a static IP address so it can communicate with the devices. And that was on one of the tutorials.
So the question is, where does the CB6000 connect to?
The CB6000, there's a silver connector and a black connector. The silver connector, you use a Cat5 or Cat6 cable, and it goes from the silver connector to either CLAN 3 or 4 of the CM3000. In fact, I'll go up to the CM3000. Right here, you can see my screen. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 network ports. The first two on the left, we call it LAN 1 and LAN 2. Those do not have power. Number 3 and number 4, those have 12 volts in addition to network connectivity. So either 3 or 4 is going to connect to the silver connector of the CB6000. And if I go back up to the CB6000, I'm looking at the back of the CB6000. The silver connector is the network plus power. The black connector, you don't need the black connector unless you're not connecting the CB6000 to the network, or if you don't have a CM3000. So the black connector is kind of like an extra connector that allows you to do control without connecting to the network. But for our cases, to keep the wiring simple, we'll go ahead and use that silver connector. So if your computer is set to a static IP address, we always recommend 192.168.1.100. It's just an easy number to remember, and we intentionally stay away from .100 in all of our devices and all of our defaults, because that's where we steer the integrators to. So if your computer is set and you're interconnected, our network devices all have a built-in web server. And so they act as like an IP camera, anything like that, where if you open up a web browser, any web browser will work. If you open up a web browser and type in the URL the IP address of the device you want to communicate with, in this case it's going to be the CB6000, and I will open up, you can see I'm connected via the web browser, and you can see up in my upper left-hand side, my IP address happens to be .112 at the end instead of 103, because I've got more devices interconnected, so I have to change the IP address so there's not an IP conflict. So this is what you should see. There is a sort of a little footnote to web browsers. We've tested with as many web browsers and web versions as we can get a hold of, and everything seems to work fine. The only issue we've ever had is with Internet Explorer, and sometimes we have problems with Internet Explorer when you go to save a file. When you've built a project and you go to save a file, if you ever see that it saves a file faster than you would expect, and you're on Internet Explorer, we just caution people to double check that, because what happens with Internet Explorer is it tries to outsmart itself. It caches things that it thinks it already did. So just a footnote that I'm not saying you can't use Internet Explorer, but it's not as reliable as, say, Chrome. Okay? So we'll keep moving on. And when you're connected to any of our network devices, the CB6000, CM3000, CB2000, the way we present the web pages are identical. The look and the feel are always identical. So when you learn one, when you go to the next, it's going to be more familiar, and it's just easier to learn the next one. So we always organize our web pages with the tabs on the left-hand side. And I'll go through each one of these tabs one at a time.